Welcome back. Hope everybody had a wonderful winter break. Welcome to 2022. Today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about project based learning. Project based learning is one of the most powerful tools that you can use with your students, as it really provides your students with authentic learning experiences. So, hope you learned a little something. Look at the link for this slide deck, and you'll have access to all of the same links and things that I'm showing you. So let's talk about project-based learning and a little bit about what it is. My name is Karin Gustafson. I'm with the Educational Technology team here in Albuquerque Public Schools. Here you can see the team and the zones that we each represent. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or in need of training for yourself, your PLC, your entire school, whatever the case may be. So here's our agenda for today. Today, I want to talk to you first a little bit about what is project-based learning. It's one of those terms that a lot of us have heard thrown around a lot, but we may not exactly understand what it is. Then let's talk a little bit about why we should use PBL. Again, project-based learning is an incredibly powerful tool to use with your students, but understanding how it works and doing the front-loaded piece ahead of time will make all of the difference. Third, what's the difference between PBL and just doing a project? We'll touch on that real briefly. And then fourth and finally, we'll talk about how you can actually get started with your first project-based learning assignment. So, what is project-based learning? Well, project-based learning allows you to engage your students in real-world, personally meaningful projects. These projects are going to allow your students to connect what they know with new concepts and ideas, do some exploration on their own, and work together either with their classmates or other members of their community, whether local or larger, to again develop some real world knowledge and application. Project-based learning incorporates some sort of problem or question that really challenges the students to think outside of the box that they're used to. It also really encourages your students to do some self-exploration, go out and find those answers for themselves. Project-based learning requires sustained inquiry. Every step along the way during a PBL, students should be asking more questions, leading them to find more information and search for new ways to understand and analyze whatever the topic may be. Again, one of the most powerful things about project-based learning is that it is authentic. Instead of learning a subject just for the purpose of learning a subject, it allows students to take that subject matter and apply it to the real world and something that hopefully will matter to them and really spark some sort of an interest. Project-based learning promotes student voice and choice. Throughout a PBL, students should be doing things their way. One of the hardest things about PBL for a lot of teachers is letting go of the control. Instead of you as the teacher guiding the students where they need to go, you're there to help kind of nudge them in the right direction, but the student is really out there doing the work on their own, locating this information, coming to understand that information in a real and authentic way. PBL encourages reflection throughout the project. A project may change direction. Students may realize that what they thought they knew, in fact, is incorrect, or they need to look at it from a different angle. So students are always reflecting on what they know, what they're doing, and how they might do it better. PBL necessitates that students are constantly critiquing their work. Is what I've done good enough? Does it explain what I want to explain in enough detail? How can I revise it to make it better? And then in the end, your students are going to come up with a final product or a presentation that is actually created for a real audience, not just to share with their fellow classmates, not just to share with you as the teacher, but to share with the people out there that this project actually relates to. whether it be your school community, your local community, your statewide, your national community, whatever the case may be. I should mention that everything that I'm going over today is based upon the PBL guidelines developed by the Buck Institute for Education. If you go to www.pblworks.org, you can sign up for a free account with the Buck Institute. They are not the only group out there doing project-based learning, but they are one of the most highly regarded, and they are the organization that I have learned all of my knowledge about PBL through. So why should you use project-based learning? Project-based learning does require a little bit more work on the teacher's behalf at the beginning, but in the end, it really gives so much more to the students. The reason project-based learning is so powerful is that it allows our students to develop the qualities and characteristics that colleges, community colleges, employers, the military say that they're looking for in their future personnel. They want employees or students who are problem solvers, who are responsible and able to do what's expected of them without being constantly reminded of what they need to do, push towards getting those final results. They want students and employees who can work well with others. Because project-based learning really requires collaboration in one method or another with quite possibly people they might not generally collaborate with, it really fosters that ability to work well with a myriad of different types of people. They want individuals who can work independently. While a PBL does incorporate some group work, some collaboration, a lot of it has to be done independently, again, outside of the direct influence of teachers and others. Most importantly, a lot of these future employers and colleges want critical thinkers, students that can get from point A to point B in whatever method is necessary. It may not be a straight line. They may have to go do a little bit of digging through the weeds to get there, but PBL really fosters critical thinking. We want individuals who are confident, who feel like they can do what needs to be done. We want individuals who can manage their time and work effectively. Because of the way a project-based learning unit works, there are timelines, there are due dates that must be met in order for the students to progress through this project. So it really pushes that timeliness and that ability for students to be efficient and effective. Of course, we also want students who can communicate well. Because students are going to be putting together a project or a presentation for that real world audience, it's going to really foster that ability to communicate with a target audience. In addition to these kind of soft skill, real world skills that PBL fosters, PBL aligns perfectly with next gen science standards. So for all those science teachers out there, very easy to work next gen into this. PBL also works directly with Common Core state standards for English. Not so much math, though depending on your unit, you can certainly do that as well. As I mentioned before, it allows for authentic learning. That authentic learning is going to be far more engaging for students. It's going to make students really, hopefully, want to do the work, be personally invested in what they're doing, rather than just kind of following instructions and doing the minimum of what needs to be done to get the assignment completed. Last but not least, PBL promotes connections between communities and the world. One of the things a lot of post-secondary institutions and employers say is that a lot of these incoming students, a lot of these incoming employees don't have kind of that global view of things. They have a hard time seeing beyond the classroom, beyond their family. And with a properly developed PBL, students can really develop this understanding of how what they do impacts the world around them. All right, let's take a look at the difference between doing a project versus working within a project-based learning type environment. As a classroom teacher of 24 years, I used to tell people that I did project-based learning because every one of my units ended in a project. That is very different. The Buck Institute likes to differentiate PBL from a project, as you can see here in this graphic. A project is kind of like dessert. It's what we do to finalize, or it's the culmination of a unit or a series of lessons. Whereas PBL is the main course. The project is the curriculum. The project is the instruction, not just that final demonstration of knowledge. So here we can kind of see the difference. A project is added on at the end of the instruction or alongside a unit, whereas PBL, the project is that unit. It's integrated into everything you do throughout whatever content is you're focusing on. A project, the instructor, the teacher gives all the instructions, all the expected outcomes, whereas in PBL, the student really drives the project, and the teacher is kind of that guide on the side instead of the sage on the stage, as the old saying goes. A project focuses on the end product, whereas PBL focuses on the product and the process of getting to the knowledge and skills necessary to complete that final or that overall project. A project, oftentimes it's unrelated to the standards or skills that you've been teaching. It is simply a way to demonstrate, for students to demonstrate that they kind of understood what you were talking about. Whereas PBL is completely aligned to academic standards and success skills. Projects. They can be completed alone or at home, where PBL requires some sort of collaboration. It may be group work within class. It may be collaboration with community members. It may be virtual collaboration, but that collaboration has to happen. A properly constructed and implemented PBL cannot be done without collaboration. A project, it just remains within the school world, right? The students complete the project, they turn it into the teacher, maybe they present a slide deck or a PowerPoint in class, or they turn in a paper. Where with PBL, there's real world context or applications. Students are presenting their final product or their presentation to those that would directly benefit from the outcome of that. My engineering students used to have to present things to UNM's education professors, or we would present in my architecture class to different architectural firms rather than just to one another. The experts, the target audience is going to be who that final product or presentation is for. Last but not least, a project, again, just displayed in the classroom, whereas PBL, it's shared outside of that classroom and with a public audience. So, if this all has kind of piqued your interest and you're thinking, yeah, maybe I want to give PBL a try, let's talk about how this works. So, first thing you have to do when you're deciding to implement a project-based learning system is you have to identify the content and skills you want your students to learn. My initial confusion with PBL was that it was wide open and students could kind of do whatever they wanted, and I had a hard time linking it back to what it was I needed students to learn. PBL should be built specifically around your content and your skills, your standards, whatever it is your course focuses on. Once you know what those skills and those standards are, then you have to determine how much time you're going to dedicate to this PBL. PBLs need to be at least a week long in order to have that real authentic, engaging purpose involved within them. Anything less than a week, it's really just a project instead of PBL. PBLs may take much longer than a week. It was not unusual with my advanced students for a PBL to last the entire semester, incorporating things that students had learned over the previous years in my courses. Next, you need to develop your driving question. The keystone for any PBL is a driving question. And this is oftentimes the most difficult part for the teacher. So let's talk a little bit about how to draft a driving question. So, a good driving question has 3 criteria. 1, it's engaging to the students. It's a question that makes the students go, oh, yeah, I wondered that too, or I want to learn more about that. So it's easy for them to understand. And of course, it really, that driving question should immediately cause students to start developing additional questions related to that. A good driving question must be open-ended. There can't be one right answer. There has to be lots of ways to answer that question, no one necessarily any better than the other. That's not to say that there aren't wrong answers, but there's never just one right answer. A good driving question must also be aligned with those learning goals. That question is what's going to keep students working within that scope of what you want them to focus on within your curriculum, whether it be your standards, the skills that you're trying to develop in your students. Those need to be there as part of that driving question. When developing a driving question, there's 2 different types that you can do. The first one is a philosophical or issue-related question. Things like, is there liberty and justice for all in our society? Lots of potential answers for that. No one, but especially in this day and age, that's the type of question that might really pique students' interests. What should America's policy on immigration include? What does it matter what we eat, or does it matter what we eat? These are philosophical. There's lots of potential answers to that. Now, this type of question poses a lot of specific challenges. Your second question is a product-related question or related specifically to the problem that must be solved. Questions like, how can we protect an endangered species? Obviously, with a question like that, the end product or that end presentation is going to be the student's solution to that problem. How can we as historians create podcasts that tell the story of our future or of our city? How can we as historians create podcasts that tell the story of our city? Lots of different ways to develop those podcasts. Students immediately know that in the end, they're going to need to create some sort of a podcast, and the whole PBL is based around how that podcast is developed, what content should be included, how do you make that podcast engaging for your target audience? What kind of bridge can be best used to cross this canyon? I taught engineering design. Great question. It forced students to look into the different types of bridges, look into the physics and the engineering and the science of bridge design and building. And in the end, students knew that they were going to have to build some sort of a bridge to demonstrate whether or not their solution actually worked with, address that question. Now, these 2 different types of driving questions have some very specific pros and cons. A philosophical question, well, the pros are that they're very highly engaging. It's those debatable issues that, if you're sitting around talking about it, there's lots of sides to it. It promotes further questioning really easily. What is freedom and justice for all? What is freedom? What is justice? For every question they answer, more questions are going to arise. And then, of course, one of the biggest pros to a philosophical type question is that it resembles an essential question. Students have been exposed to essential questions for years. As teachers, we all learned how to write essential questions when we were going through school, that sort of thing. So it makes it a little bit easier transition for both the teacher and the student. The cons, they're much harder to write because you have to develop a driving question that can actually be addressed. They're more difficult for students to address because the philosophical nature of the question makes it a little bit esoteric. It's a little bit harder to nail down. The other con to this is, for our elementary school teachers, this may be a little too advanced. It may be a little bit hard for our younger students to wrap their brains around. Certainly not suggesting it can't happen, but these types of questions are often best utilized with upper grade levels. Now, our product based questions are much easier to write because you've got that end product in mind, presentation, model, whatever that project is going to be. It's easier for students to address because they know what the final outcome should be, at least in a general idea. It defines the kind of thinking students are expected to do. I want you to think like an engineer. I want you to think like a historian. I want you to think like a scientist. Where with those philosophical questions, gosh, you can approach it from many different methods of kind of thinking. And then, of course, the other pro is that it includes a real world deliverable. In the end, there's a tangible thing that students can present and say, here is my solution, my final answer, my final product. The cons, well, it can be a lot less engaging. If you're doing something like a bridge project and a student goes, I don't care at all about bridges, you're going to have a hard time engaging those students in that, where those philosophical, they can be really far more applicable to just about anybody because they're those real life situations and questions that we're all dealing with. The roles may be a little bit less authentic because you're forcing a student into a specific mindset or role, or at least group of mindsets and roles that may not be natural or appealing to your students. Finally, it may not provide enough student choice and voice. Because you're telling students what you want them to present, they don't have or create. They don't have the freedom to come at it from whatever direction they see as best. Once you've completed writing your driving question, you are then ready to move on to the next steps. For this, the Buck Institute has developed a project plan that is free to use for anybody. If you click here on the template link in the slide deck, it will take you to the web page. You will need to create an account up here if you do not already have one. That account is free. This project planner is available both as a Word document or Google Docs. If you click on Google Docs, it will open up an example of that template. You can then click on Use Template here in the upper right-hand corner, and a copy of this template will be created in your Google Drive, assuming you are logged into your Google Chrome account. This project planner then contains all of the information that you need to complete in order to develop a fully functional and successful project-based learning system. All of the text here in red will help you fill this information out, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples. But I highly recommend this project planner for those that are delving into PBL for the first time. So after completing your driving question, you're going to summarize your PBL. This is going to provide a basic overview of it for community members, administrators, students, etc. You then are going to document any of the standards you're addressing, whether it be Common Core, Next Gen, whatever the case may be. You'll develop and attach your desired rubrics. Again, the Buck Institute has created a template for you. If you click on this link, again, it will take you to this template. You can click Use Template here to add a template into your Google Drive. And here's a very simple template for evaluating your students' products and things. Next step then is going to be to outline the project milestones and then develop a calendar for your project. Here in the sample projects, you can see a couple examples of projects that you might want to do with students. VaxFacts is a very newly developed project by the Buck Institute, all about COVID vaccines and the pros and cons of that information from a scientific background. And then here's a story time channel about how can we make stories come alive for kids in the community for grades K through 2. If you click on either of these links, we'll look at VaxFacts. It will take you again to the Buck Institute page. To see the full project, you will need to again create an account or log in. But with this project, you can see all of the information that you need. Project summary. Confusion and fear about vaccines, especially the new mRNA COVID-19 vaccines, is leading to the resurgence of COVID-19 cases around the United States. We've got all of our learning goals related to our standards and things, our Common Core state standards for ELA. We've got our different state standards, depending upon what state you developed your project in. Got key vocabulary, literacy skills, success skills, major products and considerations. Then you have your milestones here. So you can see this is again for high school, 1 to 2 days. Claim and support questions lists for a team or whole group. The audience is the team. And then the key or the driving question, what do people in our community need to know about vaccines? And this, of course, is the lesson plan for the teacher to utilize to implement this with their students. The entire project is laid out here for students to utilize and for you to help guide students. They've even included some other Buck Institute tools like the Reflection Strategy Guide, etc. You can always download a copy of this if you want to have it for your personal use. The Project Designer is a great tool. It costs $30 for a lifetime subscription. If you really want to start developing project-based learning, this is definitely worth the money, in my opinion. Now let's take a little deeper look at the K through 2 lesson called the Storytime Channel. Again, if I click on this link in the slide deck, it's going to take me to the My PBL Works page where I can see the entire PBL. Again, make sure you're logged in or create your account before doing this. Now, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and download the PDF so that it looks like that planner that you would download from the PBL Works website. So if I click download PDF, that download happens down here at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and open that guy up, and here we have our project. So if we dig a little deeper into this project, you'll see here at the very top, there is my essential question. How can we make stories come alive for kids in our community? Right? There's no one right or wrong answer there. There's no specific deliverable or project that has to be done. There's lots of potential options. We have our project summary, where this is all outlined here specifically. They've even added some hyperlinks here for a couple different things, like the close reading strategy and a reader's theater script setup. So then we come down and we look at our learning goals. Here you can see that they've added some Common Core state standards for ELA, right? All specific to those K through 2 Common Core standards. They've also included some key vocabulary. Oh, we see that it's for grade 2. It can be applied to K through 3. Keep in mind that this is a template developed by the Buck Institute and could be customized for your own personal use. They've included some key vocabulary they're expecting students to be able to define and utilize over the course of the project. It's key, again, to realize that they're not necessarily going to tell students about this vocabulary straight out, but again, allow students to find this terminology, define this terminology, be able to utilize it over the course of the PBL. Some literacy skills that are important to this lesson that they are planning on incorporating into the project, and some success skills. Then we see the major products that the instructor is hoping students will develop over the course of this project. Storyboards for scripting. Already talked about the reader's theater piece that they linked in there, and a script or part of a script for a video. Those are going to be the individual products. Remember, we mentioned that PBL is individual and collaborative work. Then we've got the team or whole class products, reader's theater style script, and a video of the dramatic reading. Then, very important, making this authentic and presenting this to a real audience. They're going to make this public using Storytime Channel, video premiere party, and a screening at the school or local library. They've added some considerations that you might want to consider when working with your students. If you were developing this lesson plan on your own, obviously you would customize this yourself. But what is the range of literacy skills in the classroom? You want to think about that if you're going to implement this project. What fables or folk tales do you plan on incorporating into this project? Do you want to make sure that you're representing gender, culture, background diversity, etc.? Then they ask you, how can you use this project to engage students' families? Because again, the idea is to help build that idea of community and collaboration. What strengths or interests are students bringing into your classroom? Because this should all be about student voice and choice, you want to think about how students can inject themselves into this project. Consider the context of the project. Right? Consider the content and skills, etc. Now, here's where it comes to scheduling. You're going to come up with the milestones. What are the main stepping stones, or as I would have called it, the main chunks of the project? So milestone 1, the question we want students to answer is, how can we make stories come alive for kids in our community? This is a driving question for this particular milestone. Students view a storytelling performance and create a list of questions. So this would require you to use 1 to 2 days, need to know questions, and then some activities and things that you might incorporate into that. Okay, so all of that is going to be that first milestone of the project. We've got notes, again, that reflection strategy guide, so that you could incorporate that reflection into your students' work as you're going. Then we have milestone 2, our driving question. What are some similarities and differences in stories across cultures? 4 or more days are estimated for this. Again, we look at what assessments are going to be used. What are key questions that students should be able to answer during the course of this particular milestone or section of the project? They've linked in all sorts of great other rubrics and resources for you to use during this project. We go on to milestone 3. And milestone 3 is how are stories told 4+ days. So you see here, we're already 10 days into this lesson, or this PBL at least. We've got our assessments, our key student questions, our activities. So you can see these can become very detailed, very in-depth, and because they're entirely student-driven, with you as the teacher just being the guide, the authenticity and the engagement opportunities are just almost boundless with this project. All right. Again, you can have access to all this through the Buck Institute PBL Works website. Milestone 4, another 4 days. Now keep in mind, this is a project designed for K through 2. This isn't just a secondary thing. PBL can very successfully be implemented into the elementary or even pre-K classroom. Milestone 5, how can we read our stories in ways that make them come alive for others? Another 4 days. So the richness and the depth of PBL are just amazing, but it does take some time and a lot of thought and a lot of planning to prepare this. Milestone 6, this is the final milestone. How can we share our stories with the kids in our community? Again, 1 to 2 days there. Then at the end, we've got our notes, things to think about. All of our project files and rubrics and things are linked in here. Again, a lesson being prepared for you. When you prepare it for yourself, it might look a little bit different. How to launch this project. How to develop and critique your project. Just amazing results, amazing things that you can do here in this project. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today as we look at project-based learning. If this has piqued your interest, if you're interested in learning more, you want to delve deeper, please don't hesitate to go to the pblworks.org website where all of these resources and many, many more can be found. Or you can always contact us here at edtech@aps.edu, or use one of these forms that I'm linking or showing you here on the page to contact us. Thanks. Have a great spring semester, and we look forward to hearing from you.